Imagine your life is perfectly planned. A successful career, a stable relationship, and a future with no surprises. But suddenly, the past knocks on your door, bringing up feelings and decisions you thought you left behind. This is the story of Min Ho, a man who built an empire but forgot to take care of what truly mattered. When fate brings him face to face with Co. Jean, his pregnant ex-wife now transformed into a strong woman, the past and present collide in a brutal way. What happens when a man tries to fix what he broke? When regret mixes with the desire for change? Get ready for a journey of redemption, love, and second chances. The spring rain beat relentlessly against the huge glass windows of the Lumiere restaurant, one of the most exclusive establishments in Gangnam. The rhythmic sound of the drops created a melancholic melody that blended with the discreet murmur of elegantly dressed customers. It was a typical April night in Seoul, when spring hesitates between the chill of winter and the warmth that is yet to come. Co. Jean stood behind the service station, her hands trembling slightly as she held the tray with 2 crystal glasses. The 7-month belly weighed on her back, making each movement a silent struggle against fatigue and pain. The elegant restaurant uniform, which had once fit perfectly on other employees, now barely managed to disguise her condition. She took a deep breath, straightened her posture with the dignity still left in her wounded soul, and headed toward table 12. She couldn't imagine that her life was about to be turned upside down once again. At table 12, Min Ho checked his Patek Philippe for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. He was late, something that rarely happened in his meticulously organized life. At 38 years old, he was the type of man who commanded attention in any room. Impeccable Italian suit, handmade leather shoes, and that confident posture of someone who had never needed to fight for anything in life. His import and export company had become an empire over the last 2 years, especially after the divorce, when it channeled all his pain into unbridled ambition. "Sorry for the delay, darling," he said, gently kissing Yuna's face as he sat in a chair with a privileged view of the illuminated city. The meeting with the Japanese investors ran longer than expected. We closed an 8 billion won contract. Yuna smiled that calculated smile that he had come to appreciate. At 26, she was exactly what you'd expect from the girlfriend of a successful businessman. A model, perfectly styled hair, a red dress that cost more than the monthly salary of most people. She represented everything money could buy: beauty, status, envy from others. "You're amazing, Appa," she said, running her manicured hand along his arm. "That's why I love you. Always focus on success." Min Ho settled into the chair, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. His life was exactly where he wanted it. Profitable, predictable, without emotional complications. Every $1 million contract, every business achievement was like validation that he had made the right decisions, especially the decision to get a divorce. "Waiter," he called, snapping his fingers with the casualness of someone used to being served immediately. "Bring the tasting menu and a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2010. Yuna laughed, pretending to be surprised as she always did. "Appa, that wine costs over 500,000 wons a bottle. So what? Life is meant to be lived, right? Money is made exactly for this." They were discussing the trip they would take to Jeju Island over the weekend when a waitress discreetly approached their table. Min Ho continued talking about the 5-star resort he had booked, gesturing with his hands as he described the suites with ocean views. His confident voice echoed to a sophisticated environment, blending with the sound of rain and the subtle clink of cutlery against fine porcelain. But something made him stop speaking mid-sentence. Maybe it was a hesitant way the person approached, or maybe it was that sixth sense that alerts you to seismic changes about to happen. When he casually lifted his gaze, expecting to see just another anonymous employee, the world simply stopped spinning. It was Co. Jean, his ex-wife, the woman he had loved with the intensity of 1,000 suns for 5 years, and then hated with the force of 1,000 storms for another 2. She was standing there, beside the table, wearing the restaurant's elegant uniform, holding a tablet to take orders with the same delicate hands he remembered kissing countless times during the golden years of their marriage. But what shocked him the most wasn't seeing her working as a waitress in the place where they had celebrated their first wedding anniversary. It was the fact that she was pregnant, very pregnant. The rounded belly was impossible to hide, even with the uniform carefully chosen to disguise it. She must have been 7 months along, maybe 8. The mental calculations formed automatically in his head. This meant that she'd gotten pregnant more than a year after the divorce, more than a year after he had said terrible things that still echoed in his conscience during sleepless nights. "Good evening," C.O. Jean said, her voice low and controlled, carefully avoiding looking directly at him. "Can I take your order?" The silence that followed was deafening. Min-ho was literally speechless, as if someone had sucked all the air from his lungs. 2 decades of privileged education, an MBA from an American university, years of leading business meetings. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. There was C.O. Jean, pregnant, working as a waitress at the most expensive restaurant in Gangnam, the same restaurant where they had toasted the future with French champagne, where they had planned dreams that shattered like glass against the wall of reality. Yuna touched his arm, sensing that something was deeply wrong. "Appa, do you know her?" Min-ho tried to respond, but the words refused to come out. His eyes couldn't look away from C.O. Jin's belly, the way she leaned slightly on one leg to relieve the weight, the exhaustion visible in every line of her face, even with the light makeup she wore for work. C.O. Jin was also struggling to maintain her professional composure. Her hands trembled almost imperceptibly as she held the tablet. And Min-ho could see that she was making a superhuman effort to not collapse right then and there. He knew her so well, always too proud to show weakness, always too strong to ask for help. Some things never changed. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked again, this time allowing herself a quick glance at Min-ho before quickly diverting her eyes. The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. 3 people trapped in a moment that would define the rest of their lives, surrounded by the luxury and normalcy of a restaurant where others continued dining, as if the world hadn't just been completely restructured. Min-ho knew that any word that came out of his mouth now would change everything forever. Yuna was waiting for an explanation. C.O. Jean was hoping he would leave, and he had no idea what he was expecting from himself. The rain continued to tap against the windows, indifferent to the human drama unfolding at table 12, where the past had just collided violently with the present, leaving the future completely uncertain. "We?" Min-ho stuttered, still in shock. The words refused to form coherent sentences in his normally organized mind. "Min-ho, Appa, who is this girl?" Yuna asked, now clearly irritated with the strange situation unfolding before her. C.O. Jean closed her eyes for a second, as if gathering all the strength left in her tired body for what would come next. When she opened them again, there was a sad determination in her eyes that Min-ho recognized immediately. It was the same expression she had on her face during their last argument 2 years ago, in the lawyer's office, when everything had finally crumbled between them. "I'm just a waitress, miss," C.O. Jean answered Yuna, maintaining a professional tone despite the barely perceptible tremor in her voice. "I've worked here for a few months." "A few months," Min-ho repeated, more to himself than to her. His mind was processing information at full speed. You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. It was an obvious statement, but the words came out of his mouth as if he needed to hear his own voice confirming the impossible reality before his eyes. 7 months, C.O. Jean completed, her voice firm but with an almost imperceptible tremor at the edges. Min-ho did the mental calculations, as he did with all the important contracts in his company. 7 months. That meant she had gotten pregnant more than a year after their divorce. More than a year after he had screamed in her face that he never wanted to see her again, that she had destroyed everything they had built together with her lies and imaginary betrayals. Whose is it? The question slipped from his mouth before he could think it through. It was invasive, cruel, and completely inappropriate, but jealousy and curiosity spoke louder than politeness. C.O. Jean looked at him with a mixture of pain and indignation that hit him like a punch in the stomach. "That's none of your business, Min-ho." "Min-ho, Appa." Yuna slammed her hand on the table hard enough to draw the attention of people at neighboring tables. Her face was red with anger and embarrassment. "Can you explain to me what the hell is going on here? Who is this woman?" For a moment, Min-ho considered lying. He could simply say she was a distant acquaintance, apologize for confusion, and continue the dinner as if nothing had happened. He could pretend that the pregnant belly wasn't screaming truths he didn't want to hear, That Seo Jin's tired face wasn't awakening feelings he thought he had buried forever. But there was something in the way Seo Jin looked at him. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with a deep, resigned sadness that stopped him from continuing to pretend. "It's my ex-wife," he said softly, still looking directly at Seo Jin. The silence that followed was so deep it seemed to suck all the sounds from the restaurant. Yuna was speechless. Some people at the nearby table began to whisper discreetly, and Seo Jin lowered her head as if she wanted to disappear. "Your ex-wife is a waitress?" Yuna asked, incredulous. Her voice held a barely concealed tone of disdain. "Minho, Appa, you never told me you were married." "I was married," he corrected automatically, but his eyes remained fixed on Seo Jin. "For 5 years." Seo Jin took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of a situation that was rapidly derailing. "I'll call another waiter to serve you," she said, turning to leave. "Wait," Minho said, standing up so quickly he knocked over his chair. The sound echoed through the elegant restaurant like thunder. "Seo Jin, wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. Minho could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hands clenched into small fists at her sides. Even from behind, he could read every emotion crossing her. He had always had that ability, even in the worst moments of their marriage. "Please," he said, his voice coming out more desperate than he intended. "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about," Seo Jin replied without turning, her voice low but clear enough to cut through the silence. "You made that very clear 2 years ago." His words came back like ghosts from the past. Minho remembered perfectly the last conversation they had in the lawyer's office, when the divorce papers were signed. He had said horrible things, accusations born of his sick jealousy and the paranoia he had developed in the last months of their marriage. Words that now seemed to echo in the sophisticated atmosphere of the restaurant like sharp blades. "Minho Appa, I'm leaving," Yuna announced, standing up and grabbing her Chanel bag. Her voice was heavy with anger and humiliation. "I'm not staying here to watch you make a scene with your pregnant ex-wife." "Yoon, I'll wait." He tried, but she was already walking toward the exit, her Louboutin heels furiously clicking on the polished marble floor. Minho stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant, between the overturned chair and his ex-wife, who still had her back to him. Other customers began to stare more openly, whispering to each other about the strange scene unfolding at the most expensive table in the establishment. "So, Jean," he said more quietly, aware they were being watched. "Please, just 5 minutes." She finally turned, and when Minho saw her face head-on for the first time in 2 years, he nearly lost his balance. She looked different, thinner in the face despite the prominent belly, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully conceal, and a sadness in her eyes that he had never seen before, not even in the worst moments of their marriage. But she was still beautiful. She was still the woman who had stolen his heart in college, who had shared dreams and nightmares with him, who had been his best friend before becoming his greatest pain. 5 minutes or what, Minho?" she asked, her voice loaded with bitterness that cut through his heart like glass. "Do you want to know whose baby it is? Do you want to know how I ended up here? Or do you just want to satisfy your curiosity so you can go back to your pretty little girlfriend?" The bitterness in her voice was like a slap to the face. Seo Jin had never spoken to him like that, not even when they fought badly in the last months of their marriage. She had always been sweet, understanding, trying to solve things with dialogue and infinite patience. This wounded woman in front of him was someone he had helped create with his cruelty and mistrust. The restaurant around them continued normally. Waiters serving tables, customers talking, life going on, but to Minho, it seemed that time had stopped completely in those 5 minutes that would change everything. I didn't expect to see you like this," Minho finally said, unsure of how to express the whirlwind of emotions taking over his chest. "Like what?" Seo Jin asked, crossing her arms over her belly in a defensive gesture. "Pregnant or working as a waitress?" "Both," he admitted with brutal honesty. Seo Jin let out a humorless laugh, a bitter sound he had never heard escape her lips. "Life didn't stop when you kicked me out of yours. Minho, I kept living. I'm still trying to survive." "Kicked you out?" he repeated, confused. "Seo Jin, you wanted the divorce." She looked at him as if he were completely insane. Min-ho, you asked for the divorce. You said you couldn't look at me without feeling disgusted. You! Okay, he interrupted, realizing they were drawing too much attention. Some people at nearby tables had stopped eating to discreetly observe the drama unfolding. Let's not discuss this here. We won't discuss anything anywhere, C.O. Jean said, adjusting the apron of her uniform with hands that trembled slightly. I have work to do, and you have a girlfriend to chase after. She's not important, Min-ho said without thinking. Not important? C.O. Jean repeated, incredulous. Min-ho, you were here having dinner with her. Obviously, she's important enough for you to bring her to a restaurant that costs 500,000 wons per dish. Min-ho didn't know what to respond. Yoon-ah was important in the sense that she was his current girlfriend, but seeing C.O. Jean there, pregnant and working, he realized that nothing he built in the last 2 years made any sense. His whole new life seemed superficial and empty compared to the intensity of what he was feeling in that moment. The baby, he started, looking at her belly again. It's not yours, C.O. Jean cut in, guessing the question. You can relax. I didn't come here to complicate your life. I didn't think that, he lied, because for a second, he had thought exactly that. You did, and it's okay. You've always been good at thinking the worst of people. The sentence stung because it was true. During their marriage, Min-ho had developed terrible paranoia, always thinking C.O. Jean was hiding something, always suspicious of everything and everyone. This mistrust had been one of the factors that destroyed their relationship. So, Jean, I need to know what happened to you, he said, his voice quieter. How did you end up here? I ended up here because I need to work to survive, she said simply. I don't have the comfortable life I had when I was married to you. But you didn't have to work as a waitress. You have a degree in business administration from Yonsei University. You've always been smart. Being smart doesn't pay bills when you've been unemployed for 2 years and are 7 months pregnant, she interrupted. No one wants to hire a pregnant woman for an administrative position. Min-ho felt his chest tighten. He knew C.O. Jean was competent. She always had been. During their marriage, she took care of many things in his company, even without an official position. She was organized, detail-oriented, had brilliant ideas. The thought of her being rejected in interviews because of her pregnancy filled him with an anger toward himself that he hadn't expected to feel. And the father of the baby? He asked, knowing he was treading dangerous ground. C.O. Jin's face hardened completely. He disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. Min-ho clenched his fists involuntarily. The idea of someone abandoning C.O. Jean while pregnant filled him with a rage he couldn't explain, especially knowing how much she had always wanted children, how she had suffered during their marriage because she couldn't get pregnant. What kind of man does that? He murmured. The kind who wasn't ready to be a father, C.O. Jean replied, her voice tired. It wasn't his fault. We both knew it was just something casual. Casual, Min-ho repeated, feeling a strange pang in his chest that he couldn't identify. Jealousy, sadness, regret, all mixed together in a confusion of emotions. Look, Min-ho, I really need to get back to work, she said, glancing nervously toward the counter where the supervisor was watching their conversation with a stern look. My boss won't like it if he sees me talking here for too long. How long have you worked here? 4 months. And before that, I worked in other places, stores, offices, wherever I could. Nothing that lasted long. Min-ho looked around the restaurant, noticing for the first time how hard it must be for her to be standing so long, serving tables, carrying trays, 7 months pregnant. This can't be good for the baby, he said more to himself. It's better than starving, C.O. Jean replied dryly. The response hit him like a punch in the stomach. Starving. C.O. Jean was at risk of starving. The woman he had loved more than anything in life, who slept beside him in silk sheets and woke up to breakfast prepared by the maid. C.O. Jean, he started, but she was already walking away. All right, Min-ho, take care of your girlfriend. She seemed nice. With that, she turned and walked off, leaving Min-ho standing alone in the middle of the most expensive restaurant in Gangnam, surrounded by wealthy people who continued dining as if nothing had happened, as if his world hadn't just collapsed for the second time in 2 years. He stood there for a few minutes, watching C.O. Jean serve other tables. carrying dishes that cost more than her weekly salary. He saw how she forced herself to smile at the customers, how she hid her exhaustion, how she subtly placed a hand on her back when she thought no one was looking. When he finally left the restaurant, Min-ho felt like he was waking up from a dream or a nightmare. He wasn't sure anymore. The rain had stopped, but he didn't even notice. His head was too full, processing everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. In the car, driving back to his apartment in Hanam-dong, Min-ho couldn't stop thinking about the tired expression on Seo-jin's face, the way she had avoided looking directly at him, as if it hurt too much. And he knew it hurt because it hurt him too. In the last 2 years, Min-ho had convinced himself that he had gotten over Seo-jin, that the divorce had been the best thing that could have happened. He had built a new life, a prosperous business, relationships without commitment. He thought he was happy. But 30 minutes were all it took for him to realize that he had spent 2 whole years running from the truth that he had never stopped loving Seo-jin. The phone rang insistently on the car console. It was Yuna. Min-ho looked at the flashy name on the screen, thought of Seo-jin serving tables, 7 months pregnant. And for the first time in 2 years, he made a decision that had nothing to do with money or success. Yuna, it's over. It's over between us, he said as soon as he answered. Min-ho, Appa, what are you saying? Because of that? He hung up before she could finish the sentence. Min-ho didn't sleep a wink that night. He tossed and turned in the empty king-size bed, thinking about that belly, Seo-jin's tired face, the way she trembled when she saw him. By 5 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep, took a cold shower, and went straight to the office. But not even the reports worth millions of wons could get his ex-wife out of his mind. Secretary Park, cancel everything I have today, he said as soon as she arrived. President, but there's the meeting with the Japanese investors worth 8 billion. Cancel everything. Make up that I'm sick, whatever. Park Mi-young was stunned. In 10 years of working for Min-ho, she had never seen him cancel an important meeting like this, especially not because of a woman. By 11 in the morning, Min-ho was standing in front of Lumiere. The restaurant hadn't opened yet, but he could see movement inside and saw Seo-jin organizing the tables, moving slowly because of her belly. When the restaurant opened, Min-ho was the first to enter. Monsieur Min-ho, the French maitre smiled. What a pleasure. A table for how many? A table for 1. And I want to be served by Seo-jin. The man furrowed his brow, puzzled by the specific request, but led Min-ho to a table in the corner. Seo-jin appeared 5 minutes later, and when she saw it was him, she stopped in her tracks. Min-ho could see the conflict on her face. Professionally, she had to serve him. Personally, she would rather be anywhere else in the world. What do you want here, Min-ho? I want to talk to you. I'm working. Then pretend you're taking my order. Seo-jin sighed and picked up the tablet. More to have something to hold on to as her hands trembled. Spit it out. How did you end up here? Working 7 months pregnant in a restaurant. I ended up working honestly so I wouldn't starve. Seo-jin, you didn't have to be here. You're smart, you graduated from Yonsei. Do you know how many interviews I've had in the last 2 years? Hundreds. Do you know what happened? I showed up all dressed up with a nice resume, talked about my experience. Then they found out I hadn't worked in 2 years and was divorced. And that matters? It matters a lot. They want to know why a competent woman had been out of work for 2 years. When I explained I was married and taking care of other things, they assumed I had no ambition. Min-ho had never thought about that. To him, getting a job had always been easy. He had connections, money, a name. He never imagined it could be different for Seo-jin. And when you got pregnant, that's when it turned into a nightmare. No one hires a pregnant woman for a good position. They know I'll go on maternity leave in 2 months. But that's discrimination. It's discrimination to say it outright. It's not discrimination to make up other excuses. Min-ho felt anger rise. In his world, people were hired for competence. He never imagined someone could be rejected for being pregnant. And the father of the child? He asked, stepping into territory he knew would hurt. Seo-jin's face closed off. I don't want to talk about that. I need to know. Why? You're no longer part of my life. Minho stopped. Because I still love you. Because I can't get you out of my head. Because seeing you like this is destroying me. But he couldn't say it. Because I care, he finally said. Care? CO Jean almost shouted, making some people look their way. Minho, it's been 2 years since you disappeared from my life. 2 years that you made it clear you didn't want to see me again. And now, because you found me by accident, you care? It was true, and it hurt. In the 2 years since the divorce, Minho had tried to erase CO Jean from his life, and he had succeeded, until the day before yesterday. Okay, CO Jean looked around, noticing people were paying attention. I'll tell you quickly, because I have other tables. She sat at the edge of the chair, holding the tablet like a shield. 6 months after our divorce, I met Young Woo, engineer, oil company. He seemed serious. We started seeing each other. Minho felt a stab in his chest, knowing that CO Jean had slept with another man, even though it was obvious, hurt more than he had expected. At first, it wasn't serious. I was still recovering from you. I didn't want anything intense. You didn't either. But you stayed together for almost a year. It was comfortable. He kept me company. I wasn't as lonely. Minho tried to imagine CO Jean with another man, and his stomach twisted. Was a pregnancy planned? Are you crazy? CO Jean looked at him as if he were insane. Of course not. I could barely support myself. Plan a baby? How did it happen then? It just happened, Minho. Birth control failed. And when you told him, CO Jin's face turned to stone. When I told him, I found out what kind of man he was. What did he say? He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that we'd made it clear it wasn't serious, that he couldn't take responsibility. Asshole, Minho murmured. Don't talk like that about him. CO Jean surprised Minho. He was honest. He didn't lie, didn't beat around the bush. He said he didn't want to be a father and left. And you were okay with that? I was relieved. If he didn't want the baby, it was better for him to disappear than to stay out of obligation. But didn't he help you? Didn't he take any responsibility? How was he going to help me if he didn't want the baby to exist? He made it clear that if I decided to have a child, the problem was mine. The anger exploded in Minho's chest. This was absurd. He knew that CO Jean had always wanted children, how she had suffered during their marriage for not being able to get pregnant. This is absurd. He slept with you. He has responsibility. He does, but you can't force anyone. And honestly, I'd rather raise my daughter alone than with a father out of obligation. Daughter? Minho's heart raced. You know the sex? For the first time, CO Jean smiled for real. It's a girl. Her name will be So Young. So Young, Minho repeated, feeling something strange in his chest. Beautiful name. It means eternally young. She'll need a lot of you for the life she's going to have. What life? The smile faded. A hard life. Single mother, working whatever job, no house, no money. It's not what I dreamed for my first daughter. Minho looked at her, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt truly remorseful, not for divorcing her, because he knew at the time it was the only way out, but for letting things get to this point, for letting pride and jealousy destroy the most important love of his life. CO Jean, he said, covering her hand with his, let me be part of your life again. CO Jean looked at him as if he had completely lost his mind. Minho, you have a girlfriend. You have a new life. Why do you want to be part of mine? Because I never stopped loving you. The tablet almost slipped from her hands. She stood there for a few seconds in silence, processing. You don't love me. You feel guilty. It's different. It's not guilt. It is, you saw me in a bad situation, and now you feel guilty because you think you could have prevented this if we had stayed married. But it's not love, Minho. You haven't loved me for a long time. How can you say that? Because if you loved me, you would have fought for our marriage. You would have tried to solve our problems instead of asking for a divorce. Minho remembered the last months of their marriage, the daily arguments, the paranoia, the way he would come home already expecting a fight. She was right. He had made their life hell long, before she mentioned divorce. I was wrong. Completely wrong. You were, but we can't go back. We can't erase 2 years. Why not? People reconcile all the time. People who broke up over trivial things, not people who destroyed each other like we did. It was true that they had destroyed each other. The arguments toward the end were brutal, with both of them saying things that couldn't be undone. And there's one more thing, C.O. Jean continued. I'm not the same person you married. These 2 years changed me. I had to learn to survive on my own, to fight for myself, to not depend on anyone. I'm not that woman who stayed at home waiting for you. I like this version of you, Minho said, and he realized it was true. There was something in C.O. Jean now, a strength he didn't remember seeing. You don't know me well enough to know if you like it. Let me show you who I am now. C.O. Jean shook her head. Minho, I need to focus on my daughter. Now I need to provide stability for her. I don't have time for a complicated relationship. It doesn't need to be complicated. Everything with you is always complicated. It hurt because it was true. Minho had always been intense, possessive, jealous. I've changed. Minho, it was just a day before yesterday that you were here having dinner with another woman. Literally, the day before yesterday. I broke up with her. Why? Because I realized I never forgot you. C.O. Jean sighed. That's not a reason to break up with someone. It's a reason to go to therapy. Minho laughed unexpectedly. She had always been direct. Give me a chance, C.O. Jean. Just one. A chance for what? To prove I've changed. To prove I could be part of your life without complicating things. To prove I could be the man you and your daughter deserve. The boss was approaching the table with a stern look. Carlos, you need to place a real order or there will be a problem. Then bring me a bulgogi and a Coca-Cola. When the boss left, Minho held C.O. Jin's hands. One chance. If in the end you decide it doesn't work, I'll accept it. C.O. Jin looked at him for a long time, studying his face. A chance for what exactly? Let me take care of you both during the last months of pregnancy. No pressure, no demands. Just let me be near. Minho, come live with me. Not as a couple, but as friends. You'll have your room. I'll have mine. Just so I can take care of you until the baby is born. You've lost your mind. My apartment has 4 bedrooms. You can stay in the guest room with a private bathroom. You can rest, eat well, get proper prenatal care. And after the baby is born, after that we'll see. If you want to stay, stay. If you want to leave, I'll help you find a nice place. Why would you do that? Because I want to be part of your life. C.O. Jean paused for a few seconds, and Minho could almost hear her thoughts, weighing the pros and cons. I need to think. How much time do you need? A few days. 2 days later, C.O. Jean called. Minho, I accept your proposal, but with conditions. His heart nearly stopped. First, I'll pay part of the bills. Second, no physical intimacy. Third, if we have a big argument, I'll leave. Agreed. When can I move in? Today, if you want. C.O. Jean moved in the following weekend. The first few days were strange, polite, distant conversations. But little by little, the naturalness began to return. In the 3rd week of living together, C.O. Jean became ill in the middle of the night. Minho woke up to hear her groaning in pain. Is it contractions? I don't know. It hurts a lot. Let's go to the hospital. They discovered it was premature labor. 8 months. So Young had decided she wanted to be born ahead of time. It will be fine, Minho said, holding her hand in the operating room. I'm here. When So Young was born, Minho was there. When the doctor asked if he wanted to cut the umbilical cord, C.O. Jean said, cut it for her. When they placed So Young in his arms, Minho felt the world stop. She was so small, so perfect. Hi, So Young, he whispered. I'm Minho. I'll take care of you and your mother for the rest of our lives. In the following months, Minho proved he was serious. He woke up in the middle of the night to feed her, changed diapers, took So Young to the pediatrician. C.O. Jean watched it all in disbelief. "Min-ho," she said one day, "are you sure you don't regret it?" "Seo-jin, in the last 6 months, I've been happier than in the last 2 years. This house was a mausoleum before you both arrived." It was then that Seo-jin realized she had fallen in love with him again. Not with the man he was before, but with the man he had become. "Min-ho," she said, placing So-young in the crib. "I love you." Min-ho stopped in the middle of the room as if he had been shocked. "Really? I've fallen in love with the man you become, with the father you are to So-young." The kiss was different from any they had ever shared. It was a kiss with certainty, with peace, with mature love. "Will you marry me?" Min-ho asked out of nowhere. "What?" "Will you marry me again, but the right way this time? I want to adopt So-young. I want her to have my name." Seo-jin laughed, crying at the same time. "Yes, I accept marrying you again." 6 months later, in a small ceremony at their home with So-young, 1 year old, in Seo-jin's arms, Min-ho and Seo-jin married for the second time. When they kissed, So-young clapped, as if applauding her parents. 2 years later, Min-ho was on the balcony watching Seo-jin play with So-young on the living room floor. The girl ran around the house shouting, "Appa, appa." Every time he came home from work, "Min-ho," Seo-jin approached. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm pregnant." Min-ho picked her up and spun her around the room. "So-young is going to have a little brother." So-young ran up to them. "Appa, why are you yelling?" "Because you're going to have a little brother, Princess." "Really? I'm going to teach him to play." That night, Min-ho looked inside the house, where So-young was sleeping surrounded by love, where in a few months there will be another crib, more mess, and more happiness. He remembered the arrogant businessman he was 2 years ago, the man who had dinner with his girlfriend while his pregnant ex-wife served tables at the same restaurant. That man had died the day he saw Seo-jin working, pregnant. "So, Jean," he said, kissing her forehead, "thank you." "Why?" "For giving me the chance to be the man you deserve." "Thank you for becoming that man." And when Min-ho slept that night, he knew exactly what the meaning of his life was. To take care of the family he almost lost because of pride and had regained through humility. The millionaire businessman had discovered that true wealth wasn't in the bank. It was right there in that house full of love. The story of Min-ho and Seo-jin shows us that no matter how difficult the path, there's always room to restart, learn, and rebuild. In the end, true value isn't in what we accumulate, but in the love and connections we nurture. And you? Are you ready to believe that second chances can transform lives? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of forgiveness and change. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more stories of overcoming, love, and new beginnings. Leave a comment and tell us, what would you do for a second chance?